Hi, it's Fiona, it's Emma's mum, and I thought I'd do a video this month. We're trying to do a video sort of once a month about the sort of cost of living on a boat, cost of living on a house. I thought it was quite topical at the moment, and obviously we've had the experience of being in a house, moving onto the boat, and then moving off the boat and back into a house. So I suppose this video is probably aimed at people maybe looking at the option of living on a boat, maybe to sort of help with the cost of living. And there are lots of videos out there, and I think we've done a few breaking down all the different sort of costs of living on a boat. So this video won't necessarily be that, but I think it's going to be more of sort of an overview of maybe some of the sort of what I would call hidden costs of moving onto a boat. This isn't a negative video about living on a narrowboat. We loved our 4 years on the boat, and we didn't move off the boat particularly because of money reasons. There were other sort of factors. So if you've come across this video and you don't know who we were, we lived on a boat for 4 years. We were mainly continuous cruisers, and a few months ago we moved off the boat and back into a house. So the first thing really to say about this is a lot of the cost comparisons will very much depend on where you're coming from. If you're moving from a big house or a house with a mortgage, or if you're renting, what kind of area of the country you live in. So I think cost comparisons can be kind of quite personal, because you might save a lot of money moving onto a boat because you're living in a place with a high rent, but equally you might be saving less if you're mortgage free and you move onto a small boat. Overall, I would generally say that living on a narrowboat is cheaper than living in a house. In terms of cost comparisons, if you're a continuous cruiser, your CRT license will be roughly what you pay for your council tax and probably your water. And your license, your CRT license covers you for your bins, your water, and dealing with your sort of toilet Elsons and things like that. So I would say that's probably roughly a sort of a direct comparison with having a council tax. And if you're a continuous cruiser, you don't pay a council tax. In terms of heating costs, I think everybody's heating and transport costs are going up. So I think probably everybody's costs are going up in a similar fashion. But generally on a boat, you're heating a smaller space. So I think overall we've certainly noticed that our costs are a lot higher in the house because we've got more space to heat, and we also have more opportunity to put more electrical things on. When you're on a boat, you kind of tend to sort of I suppose self-limit what you use. So we wouldn't put on more than maybe one electrical item at a time, because you've got an inverter with a certain amount of wattage that you can deal with only a certain amount of electricity at a time. So you do tend to, I suppose, limit yourself in a natural way, whereas you don't have those restrictions in a house. I think it's easier to probably run up kind of higher electricity bills in a house than on a boat. And obviously we had solar, so in the summer our electricity was essentially free. But from what I can gather on the narrowboat Facebook pages, everybody's bills are going up. I've heard that gas is more expensive and coal is more expensive, and as I say, we're certainly finding that probably our bills are going to go up quite a bit in the house. Now, a continuous cruiser doesn't pay for a mooring. We just pay for our annual license, and then we're expected to move every 14 days. We're also expected to move a certain number of miles every year and in certain directions. You can't just sort of move around as you want. And obviously if you have a mooring, I suppose that's a little bit like having rent. So if you're going to take a mooring, then you've obviously got to factor that in. Moorings can very much vary. I think in sort of expensive parts of London they can be quite a lot. They could be a couple £100, or they could be like £400 or £500 a month, depending on what location and what services you have. But if you wanted to sort of look at the cost and keeping the cost as low as possible, because you were looking at the cost of living issues and you wanted to move on to a boat, then there are definite ways of keeping your costs down. Certainly if you've got a multi-fuel stove, a lot of people forage for wood, although really you should sort of season your wood for as long as possible, because you want to use dry wood for your fire. You're definitely going to have sort of lower bills than you may have in an average house. As I say, because you're limited on the amount of electricity you can use. If you've got solar, you can keep your costs down. And again, you're heating a sort of smaller space. But I think there are sort of costs that people don't necessarily sort of take into account, or things that might affect your ability to sort of earn, or things that might affect your ability to work if you wanted to work, say, long hours or do overtime. So if you were a continuous cruiser, because you have to move every 14 days, you'd have to factor in the time for moving, and there's certainly a lot more sort of jobs, I think, on a boat. You've got to deal with your toilet, you've got to sort of physically take your bin somewhere, you've got to fill up with water, and I think that's something you need to sort of factor in if you've got a kind of job where you're going to be working kind of a lot of hours. You do tend to sort of find quite a lot of boaters maybe work part-time or are retired, because obviously they have to factor in the time for sort of moving and doing all those sort of standard boat jobs, usually every week or 10 days. You've obviously got to be able to sort of get from where you moored to your job if you work, and you need to sort of factor that kind of thing into in terms of your time. Particularly, I think, for people who moor around London. A lot of people are attracted to having a narrowboat in London, but I think there are issues in terms of having to sort of get to work, find moorings places, find services, and these are all just factors to sort of take into account if you're looking to move onto a boat purely for the idea of reducing your living costs. Another issue we found, again because we were moving all the time, was sometimes it was harder to sort of access the cheaper supermarkets. You would find a mooring spot, and then we would just have to kind of rely on the type of shops that were available. And also you were sometimes limited in what you could store. So buying food in bulk was a little bit more difficult. You couldn't necessarily get those kind of savings by buying things in bulk, being able to put things in a big freezer, because you don't have a big freezer on a boat. And again, that's just it's not a big factor, but it's just something to take into account. You can get like supermarket deliveries, but again, it's just something you have to factor in, whether it's easy for you to get access to those sorts of services. It also can be a bit harder if you're a continuous cruiser to get things delivered from online purchases. If you're moving an awful lot and you can't find spots where you can stay for a while, you might struggle to sort of get deliveries. Another factor is if you're looking, especially if you work from home or work from your boat, is internet costs and mobile phone costs. And we had like a couple of different SIM cards so that we could always try and get internet, and again, these are just things that you need to sort of factor in terms of your cost. One of the other costs not everybody has is we paid for canal post so that we could have our mail sent to sort of one place and then scanned and emailed to us. And again, that's something you just need to sort of factor in. A lot of people use family, but again, that might delay you getting your post or deliveries, and it's just a factor to take into account, again, if you're looking at moving on to a boat purely for cost factors. I think the main issue I'd say to be careful if you were looking to move on to an boat purely for saving money is the cost of maintenance and DIY. Obviously, if you have a lot of skills, if you can fix engines, if you can weld, if you can do electrics and plumbing, then probably this isn't as relevant to you. But boats do take a lot of maintenance. Every sort of 2 to 3 years they need to be taken out of the water and blacked. Your engine needs serviced, and when things go wrong on a boat, it can be quite expensive. So these are just factors to take into account. And obviously, when you're buying a boat, is just always to try and have some budget left over to put away to take into account any repairs that you might need. And these sorts of extra costs can sometimes be quite a lot, particularly if you've bought an older boat. But one of the great factors, and one of the reasons we looked at living on a boat for a while, can live in a lot of different kinds of places, and probably places that you wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to buy or rent. I mean, a lot of people moor around London, or if you look at places like Oxford, where the house prices are incredibly expensive, then you do get an opportunity to live in areas that you may not be able to afford. So there's definitely some real positives about living on a narrowboat and having those sorts of choices where you could maybe opt to live in a place where you wouldn't be able to ordinarily be able to afford to either buy or rent. You have a huge amount of flexibility with a boat. Obviously, the other factor is if you want to move location, you're not having to buy and sell a property, and you can move your boat to different parts of the country a lot more easily than if you had a house. The other thing that we felt that when we were on the boat that saved us money was the fact that it was inexpensive for us to go on holiday. That you can move your boat, you can if you wanted to take time off work, you can move your boat, you can go on holiday, you can go and visit friends. Obviously, the cost of hiring boats is quite a lot, and there you have your own boat, and so you can kind of go on holiday quite cheaply. So there's definitely loads of positives. As I say, this wasn't designed to be like a negative video. It's just to sort of give people some, just to help people sort of think about what they might save, but what might be some of the sort of hidden costs of buying a narrowboat. I know things are quite sort of tricky at the moment in terms of cost of living, and I know people are definitely looking at living on a narrowboat as an option for reducing their costs. But I think people just need to sort of think it through, make sure they buy the right boat, make sure they've got money to fix it, and make sure that it fits in with their lifestyle. We definitely miss our boat. We really miss the sort of travelling, but we are enjoying being in a house, and we're enjoying the sort of city life. And Emma's looking forward to going to college in September. So as I say, we really miss the community, we miss everything about, and we miss our boat. I just wanted to do this video just to help people, as I say, who might be worrying about money at the moment and thinking that this is a good option. I think buying a boat is a great option. I think you need to be careful if you're buying it just to reduce your costs. Get lots of advice on all the Facebook pages. Think of all the kind of extra costs that you might not initially sort of think of before you make a decision. So thanks for watching this video. The next one will be with Emma. Bye.